Okay, we're making some adjustments to our PowerPoint presentation, something just a last minute change, so please bear with us. While that's happening, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Corrine Wrzezinski. I'm an assistant dean and the director for undergraduate research here at Michigan State University. Thanks for joining us for Grad Chats in the Life and Biological Sciences. This is normally an in-person event in the summertime where we have everyone out for a catered lunch and you meet with faculty and graduate students. But given the transition to some virtual and remote learning, we're trying this format instead. So thank you for joining us today. The goal for today is to talk about graduate school. You're going to hear from two doctoral students who are currently in graduate school to hear about why they decided to pursue a doctoral degree and advice they would have for students who are considering that process. Christina, if you could advance to the next slide, please, when you have a moment, please. You've already met me. In just a second, I'm going to have you meet two other people who are doing behind the scenes work. Heather Dover, we'll start with you, and then we'll transition to Christina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Dover. I'm the coordinator for undergraduate research. I do a lot of the management of our program. The backside of this presentation, just helping with questions and things like that.
Next, we'll hear from Christina, who will introduce herself, but will also provide instruction of how you can submit questions to the panelists. Christina?
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Eigel. I am a program assistant with the office here, and I'll be doing similar to Heather, kind of just the background moderation of questions. So if you do have those questions, make sure to let us know. This next slide will show how to ask questions. So you can ask at any point during the entire presentation using the Q&A feature. If you do have Zoom downloaded, it'll be at the bottom of your screen. If you're using the web browser, it might be at the top. So your question might be answered live. And if that's the case, then we will note that in the Q&A box. It might also be answered via text, so texting in the Q&A box. And we will kind of weave these into our pre-prepared questions. So if your question isn't answered right away, definitely just hang tight, and then we'll make sure that we address as many as possible.
Thanks, Christina. And I want to add, no question is silly, no question is stupid. If you have a question, there's probably someone else on our call today who also has that question. So feel free to ask the question. What you see here is a brief agenda of what we'll do. We'll take 5 minutes to hear from our panelists. They'll give just a brief overview about who they are and what program they're studying in. And then Christina will have just a couple questions for you in an interactive poll to help us figure out where you are in the graduate school process. And then we'll spend the rest of our time, so close to 50 minutes, just talking and answering your questions and going through some of our pre-planned questions. With that, if we could advance to the next slide, please. Let's hear from our panelists. So they're going to say who they are, what they're studying, where they're from, and which lab they're associated with. Kayla, let's begin with you.
Hi, I'm Kayla Connor. I am a fourth-year PhD student in the Department of Microbiology and Molecular Genetics. I work for Dr. Jonathan Hardy studying prenatal infection and placental infection during pregnancy, and what that means for pregnancy outcome. I am from the great state of Tennessee. I am from Knoxville, Tennessee, in the eastern part of the state, and I attended college at Middle Tennessee State University. That's where I got my bachelor's degree, and then I ended up here. So that's me.
Thanks, Kayla. Now we'll transition to Chen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chen Du. I am currently a PhD student in the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition. I specifically study human nutrition and I'm working in Dr. Robin Tucker's lab investigating sleep and nutrition. So I graduated with my bachelor's degree from Iowa State University, and I did my dietetic internship. I kind of went to like a working route first. and did my internship at Presbyterian Hospital of Dallas. And after that, I started working while pursuing my master's degree, and later on decided to pursue a PhD degree, so here I am.
Thank you, Chen. Now, for our audience members, you might think, gosh, I'm majoring in, I don't know, genetics, and I don't see someone from my disciplinary area here in the panel. That's okay. While PhD programs differ in culture and structure, there are also a lot of similarities across PhD programs. So our panelists today can talk about their experiences, but also just the general process of preparing for graduate school and applying for graduate school. So with that, let's advance to the next slide. All right, here are the 4 questions that we're going to try to get through in the next 50 minutes. Why did you decide to pursue a graduate degree? Why did you choose MSU? And then talking about what life is like as a graduate student, especially when you compare it to what your life might be like as a current undergraduate student. This works well when we have questions from you. So at any time, please start asking questions. You don't have to wait until we're done answering these 4 questions. Just start answering them or start asking them, and then we will start monitoring these questions and working them into the conversation. So audience members, please start asking questions. And we're going to start with this first. Oh, I'm sorry, Christina, I forgot the polls. I was so excited to start answering these questions. I forgot to give Christina times to answer the poll. So we're going to start with this first question of how strongly are you currently considering attending graduate school? If you could please respond to the poll. While you're doing that, our panelists will begin to address the first question of why did they decide to pursue a PhD degree? A PhD degree. So Kayla, if we could start with you as to why you decided to pursue a doctorate.
Yeah, so originally, I guess I should say my bachelor's degree is in microbiology. Originally, I was going that route because I was interested in medical school. And then I took on a research position and was getting really immersed in research at the same time as doing some shadowing for medical school, and realized that I loved doing research a whole lot more than I liked going to the clinic. So basically, I just fell in love with research and thought about what I wanted my future to look like. And I'm really fond of the idea of being able to form my own research questions and have a lot of autonomy and a lot of independence when it comes to answering research questions and forming my own questions to answer. So I decided to go to graduate school so that I would have that, both the skill set required for doing good science, but also the degree required to be more autonomous in your research.
Okay, so it looks like Corrine might be muted right now, so I'm just going to jump in real quick and kind of go over our results. It looks like over half of you know that graduate school is in your future, which is great. You're definitely in the right place. And then we have about 14% each for folks who are not sure if they need to or want to attend graduate school, or maybe you don't really want to attend, but your career path might require it. And then it looks like we have about 19% who are exploring right now. So all of you should be able to get something very helpful to you wherever you are in the process through this panel.
Thanks, Christina, for reminding me to unmute. Why don't you go ahead and ask the next question? Okay, so this will help us determine if you're an MSU student or if you're a visiting student or alum. While you're answering that poll, we'll transition to Chen and hear about why she decided to pursue a graduate degree. Chen?
Yes. So my initial interest started with working as an undergraduate research assistant. I worked in a lab investigating different types of protein, how that influenced the university students' academic performance. I thought that was very, very interesting and fascinating because at the time I really want a good academic performance as well. So that kind of triggered my initial interest. So during my undergrad research assistant period of time, I was given a relatively simple task to do, but one of the valuable experience that I gained is talking with graduate students. And when I talk with them and they share about their graduate student stories and share about their research, and I just thought that was really, really interesting. I wanted to be able to perform research as well. And later on, I moved into pursuing a dietetic degree because in my field, if I wanted to become a registered dietitian, I would need to do an internship first. So I used to apply my internship first, and I got accepted and started my internship. But I didn't forget about my like that I wanted to pursue like a graduate degree. So after I finished my dietetic internship, I started working. But at the same time, I pursued a master's degree. And also, there's another point that I want to make why it triggered even more of my interest is during my working experience. I work as a clinical dietitian in like intensive care unit. I also involved in clinical research in my role as a dietitian. So I really see how like the research shaped the practice and how research assisted in the change of the practice in my field. So I wanted to learn more and devote more of my time into learning how to produce sound research to support such changes. So that's why I pursued a PhD right now.
Thank you. And I think Christina's going to tally here. So we've got about 75% of you, or a little over 3/4 of you, are MSU students, and we have a few alumni. Thank you, alumni, for joining us. Welcome back to an MSU event. That's great. Thank you. You know, it's interesting between Kayla and Chen. You know, Kayla, it sounds like you went right through from undergrad to a graduate degree. Chen, you had some work experience, and that maybe changed your direction just ever so slightly. It helped you fine-tune that. That's something our participants should keep in mind. Some programs are fine if you come straight through from your undergraduate degree. Others may want you to get some work experience. Doctoral programs are very focused, and so having a better idea of what you think you want to research will help you in the selection process of trying to figure out which program to apply to and to attend. I see we had our first question here, and the question is that a participant asked that a lot of schools only have PhD programs and no master's degrees. I'm not sure if I'm ready to commit to a doctoral program right away. I'm confused by the time taken to complete a PhD though. If I'm jumping into a PhD, that might take 5 years, then should I expect it to be shorter if I'm coming in after earning a master's degree? Kayla or Chen, do either of your programs have a master's degree associated with it?
So the program that I'm in offers a BS-MS dual option, but they don't offer just a straight master's. So you either have to enroll in the BS-MS as an MSU student or come in and do a PhD.
Yeah. So my field works a little bit different. We do have different types of master's degree offered in the department. There are course-only masters. So for applying a PhD, having a master, it's not required, but it's preferred.
Thank you, Chen. In addition, a lot of graduate programs has someone called a graduate coordinator. And a graduate coordinator could be a staff member or a faculty member whose job, part of their responsibilities is to review, prepare the incoming new class of doctoral students. If you're looking at a PhD program or a master's degree program, try to find out who the graduate coordinator is and ask them those questions. You saw here 2 people in 2 different programs at MSU. Some have a master's option, some don't. In some PhD programs, if you go for 2 years and decide that you don't want to get a PhD, they'll grant you a master's degree. That's often more common in engineering programs, but other departments may have something like that. And just because you get a master's degree, that doesn't necessarily mean that's time that counts towards a PhD program. Just like with the undergraduate degrees that you're working with, there's a certain curriculum and there are certain research milestones that you have to reach. And so it could be that your master's program may not have the right courses that the doctoral program has in their curriculum. In some cases, for my own program, it was somewhat related between my master's degree and my doctoral degree. And so there were a couple of courses that I did not have to take because I had that master's degree. Let's see here. Jillian asked another question. Let's get to that before we talk about why you decided to apply to MSU. She asked, how specifically are we expected to know what we want to research before we apply? So I'm going to break that down into 2 questions with Kayla and Chen. Did you know what you wanted to research before you applied to graduate school? And if you did or didn't, like, how did you come to that process?
So I had it broken down to microbiology, and I was interested and still am interested in clinical microbiology and this sounds weird, but bioterrorism agents. I'm interested in infectious agents that cause disease to humans. And so I knew I wanted to move forward either in government, like defense work, or clinical work. So when I came in for my program, you come in and you do 3 rotations in 3 different labs to kind of test drive them and see how it feels and if you like the lab, and then you join the one that is the best fit. When I came in, I chose 3 different labs that aligned with that in mind, and 2 of the 3 were like very clearly in that group of ideas I was interested in, and then the 3rd one was a little bit further out. You can guess that's the lab I'm in now. So the infection during pregnancy was a little bit offset from what I expected, but I came into the lab and it was a really good fit, and I decided I really loved the research even though it was a little bit out of my comfort zone, and it was the right choice. So basically have an idea of what you enjoy, but you don't have to have like the perfect project in mind when you apply.
So Kayla, just to clarify, you had an idea, but the way your doctoral program worked is you went through a lab rotation, and then after that lab rotation, you were assigned a lab, and that's who you've been working with.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So not all programs are like that, but most, if you're interested in microbiology and a lot of the biomedical sciences, a lot of programs in that sort of umbrella will be like that, and you'll do 3 or 4 rotations to get a feel for the different labs you're interested in.
And when you say rotation, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So a rotation, when I came into grad school, it was 10 weeks for my program. It ranges, I've seen them as short as 2 weeks, and I've seen them as long as 10. And so you'll come in and you are given a small project to work on in the lab. And it's basically, you're not expected to like publish a paper by the end of this or get some groundbreaking work done. It's literally just a time for you to get a feel for the lab, find out where stuff is, what everyone else is working on, what people's personalities are like, and most importantly, what the PI is like and how they interact with their students. So PI is principal investigator, and that's the head of the lab. So the professor who is overseeing all the research. So they can be short, they can be long. One of the reasons, we'll get into it later, but one of the reasons I chose MSU was because they had longer rotations, and I wanted to have a longer time frame to get a feel for what I wanted to do. But yeah.
And so that was one approach that Kayla's doctoral program took, of these lab rotations. That's a great example of a question to ask a program coordinator if they have lab rotations. Let's hear from Chen now to see how she figured out what she wanted to research and what her entry or onboarding experience was like.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kayla that you don't have to know perfectly or propose a project that you wanted to investigate when you're applying for grad school, but having a general idea of like what like field or what kind of like an overarching type of study you wanted to do. So for me, I know that I want to do clinical study. So in my field, we could do bench study, we could do clinical study, we could also do statistical analysis type of study, or working with big database. So from those 3 different types of research, I know that I want to do clinical type of study. And for me, I didn't do a lab rotation because when I applied grad school, I approached to my mentor first. And there's another great way to find out what may be your interest is to look at the professor's portfolio on the website, and then their website and their CVs are out there, and you could look at their research and see if it matches with your interest. So you could even email them. It's like, hey, I'm interested in your research and I potentially want to work in the lab. Can we talk a little bit more, or if there's an open position or things like that. So that's another way to find out what you want to study.
Thank you, Chen. Chen, you talked about different types of research, like a bench study, clinical study, and statistical study. So statistical studies, I'm assuming that you're just doing a lot of data analysis, like via computer. But could you differentiate for our audience what you mean by a bench study versus a clinical study?
Yeah, so a bench study, it's like you're doing a lot of work on the bench, meaning like a lot of laboratory involvement, kind of like biological analysis, things like that. Is my internet connection breaking down? I'm sorry. Is my internet connection okay? So
yes, we can still hear you.
Oh, great, awesome. So yeah, and then so that's like biological type, and you're analyzing things like protein, for example, on a bench top, and you spend a lot of time in a lab and doing like biomedical kind of type of study. And for like clinical study, it involves more like people and participants. So we usually recruit participants and give them different types of intervention that we proposed, and to look at the outcome of those interventions. So that's how I differentiate between bench study and clinical study.
Thank you, Chen. You know, and this kind of goes to we had another person ask, what kinds of research did you explore as undergrads? Was it only lab-based research? Before I have our panelists answer that, I want to tell people that if you don't know what you want to study, another good way is to think about some of the courses you've taken at MSU. Was it the topic that was of interest to you, or was it the faculty member who was teaching it? If there was a faculty member who just had a very engaging teaching style, look up their bio online and see what their research area is. They may be teaching a class that's not directly tied to their research area, and make an appointment with that faculty member during office hours to learn about their research area. Conversely, if there's a subject that interests you, look at the faculty department pages of what faculty are studying. A lot of people have lab pages that give a short summary of the focus of their respective laboratory. And that's another good way to start learning about potential areas of interest. In the undergraduate research office, we have a program that talks about how to find a research experience on campus, and we encourage you to find research articles, and we help you through that process. this. So getting back to that first question, did either of you engage in research as an undergraduate student?
I did. So I kind of talked about that earlier. I did research in an organic chemistry lab. I did work with natural products. So these are compounds that come from plants, and I was isolating compounds and testing them as potential therapeutics on a fungal pathogen, so a fungal species that causes disease in humans. It was called Cryptococcus, and so it gets into people's lungs and gives you pneumonia, and it's pretty gnarly. They don't have a lot of therapeutics for it, so I was testing that, and that's how I fell in love with research.
And that was more lab-based?
Yes, so that
Okay,
was 100% in the lab.
Chen, did you have a research experience as an undergraduate student? I don't recall.
Yes, yeah, I worked as an undergraduate research assistant in a clinical lab. So we did do clinical type of study. Like I explained earlier, we had participants coming in and we collected their biomarkers. Like we collected their blood and analyzed biomarkers at a biomedical setting. So it's kind of like a mixture of lab work and people interaction work. So I learned a little bit more about different types of research through my work experience, dietetic internship as well. So there are also like public health type of programs and research that's like the intervention will be like education sessions being delivered to a specific population. So there's a lot of different types of research area. It's good to spend some time to investigate what you may like. And also, once again, like reaching out to the corresponding person and asking them questions about maybe even like shadowing them for a day or two is really get yourself immersed into that experience. If you don't try it, you don't know if you like it or not.
Just remember that every single researcher on campus, every single faculty member started off as an undergraduate student. So everyone was in your shoes at some point. So there's always a place to start. There also in that question they asked about what if I'm not doing lab-based research. And I will say that while some people only want people who have lab-based experiences, there are also engaging in a research experience gives you a lot of different critical analysis skills that can be applied across the area. So if you only have a lab-based experience or you don't have a lab-based experience, I wouldn't let that count you out. I'm going to move on to the next question. Someone said that I have an idea of what I want to apply for, though I'm wondering how exactly I apply and when is the earliest time I can do so. What do you know about these topics? For that, you need to look at each specific program. There will be deadlines of when we need to apply. A lot of the programs that I work for have either a November 1st, a December 1st deadline, or a deadline in January. There could be a thing called a rolling deadline, which means that they continually look at processes. For Kayla or Jen, do either of you remember what your application timeline was and when you started applying to graduate schools?
So I wrote my personal statement in, I want to say starting in July and August the year I applied, and then I took the GRE in August. So a lot of you won't have to do that. I know a lot of schools are doing away with the GRE now. Took the GRE in August, and my first application was due November 1st. And I had everything that, my first one was due November 1st, and the rest were due like mid-December, but I just went ahead and got everything turned in early. So best to do that if you are able.
Yeah, totally agree. Definitely start early. It's good. My experience is a little bit different because our department has a rolling enrollment. I also approached out we reached out to my mentor first. And indicated my interest of wanting to join her lab. At the time, I haven't really looked at like the application deadline, but she told me that there is a rolling enrollment, and I basically just chatted with her to say, okay, what is the earliest time that I could be transferred to MSU? Basically, I was also applying, getting all of my materials ready in August. I think I received the acceptance letter in September. So it only took a month for the rolling enrollment work. So it's good to check with the program director and also your mentor or like the PI, principal investigator that you wanted to work with.
So I think this is a great example of two doctoral programs that are both at MSU but have very different timelines for applications. So there will be differences within a university. There will be differences across universities. Something else to keep in mind for the application process is for funding. So there are graduate assistantships, there are research assistantships, or teaching assistantships, TAs or RAs they might be called. Very often to be considered for that, you have to have your application in earlier. So when you're applying, almost all applications are online now, but look at those deadlines and work with that graduate coordinator to figure out when that is. One more thought here is that Chen mentioned about networking, that she reached out to her PI to say that she was interested in working. Your networks are really important. And if you are currently engaged in a research position, talk to the PI in your lab or talk to the grad assistant who you might be working for and ask them where they went to graduate school. Who do they know? Because graduate school is a very competitive process, and the person you work for might know someone who has an opening at MSU or at another institution, and that email endorsement or a quick phone call on your behalf could really make a difference. All right, we have a lot of good questions coming in. I'm going to jump down to the one from Sonia. She asked, when is the best time to ask for letters of recommendation? And how do you keep in touch with recommenders if you're taking years off between undergrad and graduate school? Do either one of our panelists want to provide some thoughts on that question about recommendation letters?
The only advice I have on that one, because I didn't take years off of school, is ask early and remind often. Don't be annoying. Don't send them an email like every other day, but don't ask them now and then the night before your applications due be like, oh, I just wanted to remind you. No, you gotta, sometimes professors need a little bit of a push. And so ask early, ask often, and give them a small gift for their time, I think is nice. Write them a little note and give them their favorite candy or something like that. Just be sure to show your gratitude because they are taking a lot of time to do that.
I would also add, it's probably also good to send an email with the deadlines and write some information about you. Why are you interested in the program at Michigan or at Harvard or at Western Michigan? Why do you feel like you're a good fit? And what experiences that you've had that help prepare you for graduate school? When I write letters of recommendation, I have people come in and I ask them to answer those questions because I usually have a good idea of what I want to write about, but having that information will help them write stronger letters of recommendation. So, and for Sonia, if you're taking some time off, just periodically send an email saying, hey, I'm going to be going to graduate school, hopefully in a year or two. Here's what I've been doing, because it's always good to keep in touch. We have lots of questions. And we will get to them. Jillian just asked, do you still recommend taking the GRE if it's optional? I don't have a good answer on that one. I don't know if either one of our panelists have an opinion on that. That might be a good question for graduate coordinators in programs to say, I know you don't recommend the GRE, but if I take it, is it something that you look at it, or do you not even look at it? And that will likely vary by program. Sorry, I just muted myself. We had some person who asked that if they're doing their undergraduate at Michigan State University, should they not do their graduate coursework here too? So Chen and Kayla, you both decided to come here for graduate school. Could you talk about why you chose MSU for your graduate program? And then we'll get to this question about, there are different philosophies about if you should stay at the same institution for graduate school. So maybe we'll start with Chen this time.
Okay, so for why I choose MSU is because of my mentor. Once again, this importance of network. So just long story short, I met my mentor in a conference. Conferences are great places for networking and also learning, meeting different professors from different fields and learning from them, what do they study. So I met my current mentor like a year ago at this conference, and we chatted about her research and followed up with her with email. And at the time I was looking for some mentorship. I was kind of hitting a wall during my graduate school and trying to get some good advice to break through that. And so she volunteered to be my mentor through an academy program. So she can volunteer her time to be my mentor for 9 months. And during that time, I learned a lot from her and got a lot of good insight of how to navigate through academia. So I decided I wanted to work for her and work in her lab. So that's how I decided to come to MSU.
Kayla?
Sorry, I was just answering a question in the chat about internships. So I chose MSU for a few different reasons. So when I'm going to go back just a second and say, when you guys are preparing to apply, something that really helped me was to put down all the schools you're interested in on an Excel spreadsheet with the due dates for applications, the professors you're interested in working with, and like their stipend or the application fee, things like that. So I have this whole list and I applied to 5 schools, and I actually visited MSU before I even applied because I was coming up here for a different reason and really enjoyed my visit. So I ended up applying, and then for a lot of the biomedical sciences, they will call you out for an interview weekend or a recruitment weekend where you come and learn about the school for 2 or 3 days, and they'll feed you and give you orientation type information. And so I came out for that in January and really enjoyed my time again. And I got accepted to all but one school I applied to, so it became a really hard decision. There were a lot of people I was interested in working with, so it just boiled down to who had the most opportunities for me. Like, I wouldn't want to go to a school betting that one professor was going to take me. That would be kind of scary, and if I didn't get that, like, what was I going to do? So I came here because there was a huge diversity of professors and things I was interested in. Cost of living versus the stipend they give us here is really great. So as a student here, we get a stipend to live off of, and that can sometimes be in the form of a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. But for our program, it's guaranteed that we will get it one way or another. And what they give us compared to the cost of living here is wonderful and very easy to live on, for my program at least. And also just location. I liked the Midwest. I applied for a couple Midwest schools. I liked it. It's easy for me to get on I-75 South and get back to my parents if I need to. I can drive it, I can fly it. So just a few different factors.
That's a lot of great recommendation. There are a couple things I want to follow up. So if you are an MSU student, should you not stay at MSU? There's a lot of different opinion on that topic. Some people feel like you need different experiences. I think it's great to get a different institutional experience, but if you have a mentor here and you're already engaged in research, why not get ahead? We have some undergrad researchers who work on a project for 3 years. By the time they're done, they're like mini graduate students, and a lot of PIs would be happy to take them onto their labs. There are some fields that they want you to go away. You did 4 years at MSU, go somewhere else. That's a great question to ask your research mentor, especially if you're interested in saying. So I think some of it's a personal response, and then see what other people tell you. Chen talked about networking, and this leads to our question about how are you able to find a good mentor? Do you pick the university first, or do you find a mentor first? And there are different thoughts on this. Chen mentioned, and I see that she's unmuted herself, so I'll get to you in just a second, but she went to a conference and she met the person, her PI who she's working with. Networking is so incredibly important. Kayla talked about how they had rotations in labs before she had to find someone. Other programs are different, where you correspond with the mentor, and if the mentor does their own interviews, that's how you get admitted to the program. So talking to that graduate coordinator is really important. Chen, did you have other things to add?
Yes, I just want to answer the question about finding a good mentor. Also, I think picking out a university that you want to go to, it's a good start. And then you could look at the faculty portfolio on the department website and investigate a little bit more about their research. And after that, it's kind of evaluating if this faculty will be a good mentor for you. So there are a couple of ways. The first way is reach out to him or her and to set up a call and kind of get a feel of his interaction or her interaction with students. And also I was suggested by my mentors, you could also talk with the PI students and ask their opinion of like how their experience has been working with this mentor. I think that's some place to start to finding out if this mentor fits you well, or if the lab fits you well, because there's different styles of mentor as well, and because mentor is also like your manager, and there's hands-on managers, there's laid-back type of managers. It's also very important to evaluate if you will work well with your mentor as well.
And that's a great suggestion of if there's someone in particular and they've expressed interest in you, asking to talk to other graduate students who work for that faculty member is a great way to get an idea for the program. We've spent a lot of time talking about getting ready for graduate school and applying it, and I'm looking at how much time we have left. I want to transition a little bit to how graduate school is different from your undergraduate experiences. And one of our participants asked, how do you handle setbacks in your research, and how does it affect your motivation to make good progress towards your degree? My hunch is that both of you probably have encountered a setback in your research. And could you talk about how you handle failure and when research doesn't go the way you think it should?
Yeah, I think going into grad school, you should expect at some point of this process, you're going to have challenges, and that is the nature of grad school. And I think it's also how we grow when we break through it. So have that expectation going in would help you when it comes to you. You can expect that. And also really gaining time management and stress management skills are very important to help you going through that process.
Kayla, anything else to add?
Yeah, so I like what Chen said about you should expect to have challenges. You shouldn't go into it thinking, if you're going into it expecting it to be all perfect, then you've got one thing coming for you, because it's not always perfect. I personally like to ensure that I have a lot going on outside of the lab as well as inside. So like I have my big project, but I also have a lot of hobbies outside of the lab in my personal time. And I also engage in a lot of science activities that are not my project. So I lead an outreach program for the Girl Scouts in the Lansing area, which is a lot of fun. If I've had a bad day in the lab, I get to go hang out with them and we have a blast. And I remember that science can be fun, even on bad days. I do things like this, and I also have an I go there and do a lot of work and a lot of shadowing and learning from them. So, you know, if my experiment fails and I just can't be in the lab at MSU that day, I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go to the state lab and learn some public health stuff, and I get to be in the lab there. So just make sure you have a variety of things going on.
I think that balance is a very good advice. It just can't be focused solely on research. I've got one more question for the panelists, but for our participants, we still have time for a few more questions. So please make sure that if you have a question, please post it so we have time to answer it. For either Chen or Kayla, how has graduate school differed from your undergraduate experience? And again, I know that you're 4 and 1 or 2 years into your experience, but think back, if you can, to life as an undergraduate student. What are some of the key differences for either good or bad when you compare the two types of educational experiences?
I think for me, there are 3 major differences. The first one, it's in undergrad. In undergrad school, you devote a lot of time in classroom setting, and you're learning through class. That's like your primary responsibility. In grad school, you're applying that knowledge in a laboratory setting, in a real-world setting. I think that's one of the major differences. And the second one, it's about deadlines. So for undergrad school and for each of your classes, you have like deadlines for each section of your study. But for graduate school, I heard about this saying, it's a 10,000 hours project. So how you manage your time determines how quickly you're going through that time and how much you're learning from that process. So you manage your own time a lot more, and there's no one really sets it like very firm deadlines for you. Maybe the deadline will be by the end of the semester. So you have the choice of like getting your things done in the first month of the semester. You have the choice of getting everything done at the last minute. So that's one other major differences.
You know, it's also classes. I remember in my own doctoral program, classes were almost 3 hours at a time. So instead of having courses that were 50 minutes or 75 minutes, these were seminars with smaller people, and they met for a longer period of time. And Chen's comment about the timeline, when you're an undergrad, you have a syllabus, and your professor or instructor gives you deadlines for things. For some of your research, my guess is Chen and Kayla have found that either the research that you're doing is going to set deadlines, or you need to impose deadlines to make progress. Kayla, do you have other comments, or do you want to comment on how is the grad experience differ from the undergrad experience?
All I would say about it is that for me, it's less structured. So in my program, we really don't have that many classes we have to take. So that's the same for a lot of the physical and life sciences. So, you know, once you're finished with the handful of classes you have to take, it's up to you to get your work done. And, you know, it can vary from lab to lab, but my boss does not set a schedule for us. He's like, if you're gonna get it done, then you need to motivate yourself and come get it done. And so I make my own schedule. There are some weeks where I'm an insomniac and I like to come in and work all night and sleep during the day. And there are some days or some weeks that I have a 9 to 5 schedule. So it depends a lot on what experiments I'm doing, how I'm feeling, what else is going on in life. But yeah, it's just a lot less structured and requires you to be a lot more self-motivated.
Self-motivated, but also self-care is really important. I think everyone has experienced an additional level of stress because of COVID-19 and the rapid shift to virtual learning and online learning and how that's affecting labs and how people can work. I know MSU is we're working on a return to campus plan for everyone starting now. And so graduate school can also be a little emotional because you could be moving to a new area, the classes are more intense, you don't have the general education requirements and the college requirements and the department requirements. Like departments know outline a program, and then there's a lot of independent work that you do under the guidance of your PI. So it's a very different type of culture. Let's see here. We have time for any more questions from the audience. This is a great time to submit it. I think our last 2 questions were pretty much answered when you talked about how graduate school differs from undergrad. In a day, an average day could just vary on what you're working on, if you're attending a conference or whatnot. So we have one more question. So we have about 5 more minutes. So this question was it easy to make friends and connections when you moved for grad school, or do you mostly hang out with classmates? So I think that gets to what I call the socialization process. Sometimes departments have cohorts where there are a group of people who are together. Chen and or Kayla, can you talk about, do you have cohorts and how do you meet other people?
So my cohort is very close, especially, so we have microbiology as a whole, but then we also have like the environmental micro people and the clinical micro people. And the clinical micro people, we're all very close. Like we do everything together. So that's like probably my tightest friend group. But I also have made friends by doing internships like I have. I took up sailing as a hobby. So a lot of those people aren't associated with MSU at all. That's nice. I do bar classes, so like ballet-based exercise classes. I meet a ton of women there, and we have a blast, and we don't have to talk about science, so that's fun. So just try new things is my advice. It can be whatever you make it. If you don't, get out and do much outside of the lab, most of your friends are probably going to be from the lab. But if you go out and try new things in your spare time, you can meet a lot of diverse people around.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kayla. Yeah, there is a life outside of lab. So definitely you can make a lot of friends from that outside of lab kind of life. And yeah, we in our program we don't have any cohort. I am very close with my lab mates, and also I go to church, and I make most of my friends church friends, so yeah, so there it's a life outside of lab, so you can make friends anywhere you go.
Thanks, Chen. We had a question just submitted about the student really hasn't had a chance to establish a good network with professors, and she feels, or they feel that they're at a bit of a disadvantage. How may they begin to establish a network before they run out of time to apply for graduate school this year?
I think start to reaching out to professors, and maybe they need help from undergrad students. In our lab, we have like a volunteer policy that if you wanted to work in our lab, and you can let the PI know, and then we always are needing more help. Like some other labs may work the same way. So this is a great way to just go ahead and send an email to the PI of the lab, and then see and go from there, I think.
And I think going back to that suggestion of think about the courses you've taken. Was there a faculty member that you really enjoyed? If yes, make an appointment during office hours. Or if there was a topic that you really enjoyed, look on department websites to see who might be researching that topic. Many research positions are paid. Some research positions are volunteer. Volunteering is a great way to start to build rapport because it's not costing the person anything but their mentoring time. So that might be another way. We have time for one more question that just came in. How do you continue to research during quarantine? So it'd be great if we could just hear briefly from each of you about how have you managed to maintain your momentum in research during these unique working conditions.
So for all the biologists out there, you've heard of bioinformatics. You should learn it like yesterday. So I had no coding experience and I'm terrible with computers, but during quarantine, since I couldn't go into the lab, I taught myself how to code in Python and how to do some bioinformatics analyses because it will come up eventually. I can promise you that.
Yeah, for me, it's the same. We do clinical studies. We require a participant recruitment. During quarantine, we definitely couldn't do that. So we moved over research online and shifted the research direction a little bit, mainly using online questionnaires. We were examining university students' health behaviors during COVID-19 and how COVID-19 has influenced university students' health behaviors. It definitely changed over research direction a little bit during this time.
All right, we are just about out of time. So before people start signing off, there is a brief survey that if you could take a moment when you click off the webinar, that will help us improve these webinars because I think we'll be having more of these virtual webinars over the next few months. I want to thank our panelists for taking time out of their day to meet with us. Your feedback and insight has been very helpful. And finally, to the attendees, thank you for registering and investing in yourself to learn more about this topic. You'll see here online, we have email addresses of our panelists, and then also the Undergraduate Research Office. If you had a question that you felt like wasn't answered, or you think of another question after you sign off, feel free to email the Undergraduate Research Office, and if we can't answer it, we will try to connect you to someone who can answer your question. Thank you to everyone again. This webinar is over, and for our attendees, there will be a brief survey at the end. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy.